All right, we're live. Good evening again, everyone. Um, let's jump into invasive plants. Something I'm sure you're all pretty familiar with if you're living in Western Wisconsin. So, tonight we're gonna talk about just quickly what makes a plant invasive and some control options and going over what plants you'll specifically find here. If you got questions, feel free to type them or just shout them out as I'm changing slides or something.
Andy, you didn't have any slides for tonight or handouts.
No, nope. You just follow along on the screen here. No handouts for now.
And in case you weren't here when I said that in the beginning, I will send them afterwards, so you'll be able to reference everything that he's talking about later on.
And there should be time at the end for questions as well if you just want to save it till the end, but whatever you're comfortable with. So what makes a plant invasive? They can grow, everywhere, poor soil, good soil, wet soil, um, places you wouldn't expect plants to, there's certain plants to thrive. A big thing here, the second point, they grow, they'll leaf out, before anything else does, and they'll lose their leaves later than anything else does. You'll especially see that with buckthorn. It's the first green thing you'll see in the woods, and it's the last green thing you'll see in the fall. So just getting that extra growing time, that extra sunlight is a huge advantage. They can alter the soil chemistry. Again, buckthorn can do that. They actually leach some sort of natural compound into the soil that inhibits plant growth. So just real advantage there. Obviously, they can outgrow native plants, and the biggest thing is why they're invasive. There's few or no natural predators on these plants. If you think about the plants and animals that have been around for thousands of years in this region, they've been in relative harmony, all this time, competing for resources, that sort of thing, and then you get a plant from overseas, and those predators aren't adapted to eat that plant, for example. So there's nothing out there to keep them in check besides us. And on that same note, they provide little nutritional value for wildlife. So they deer and birds will only eat them, as kind of a last resort, if they're really hungry. So how did they get here? Humans is the short answer. So overseas a lot of times, whether they were shipped over intentionally, a lot of times it was for erosion control and some other intended application, and then other times they would hitchhike over unintentionally, and they spread either usually through wildlife. And I feel bad for this dog. He looks like my dog, so that kind of makes me worried for this summer. So the steps are going to be making an inventory is kind of the first thing you want to do. well, even before inventorying, you'll want to know what to look for and know how to identify these plants, and then really get to know your property. A lot of new landowners will contact me and want to get a plan going right away, but you really have to know your own property and know where the bad spots are, where everything is growing kind of. So um, that that's really an important first step there. So hopefully tonight you'll kind of learn some tips about that. And if not, if you're still struggling to identify them, have your county forester. It's me for St. Croix County. Um, if you're in a different county, call me anyway. I can lead you to the right person. So um, so taking an inventory, again, that kind of first step we're thinking about. Eventually you'll want to know exactly where, especially the invasives are, and kind of have a mental map of it, and ideally even a physical map of it. So knowing where your roads are relative to these invasives can be helpful if you have like a trail system so that you can plan for access, that sort of thing. Here's an example. This is kind of a cute map, hand drawn. You can hand draw something like this. And so on this example, we have the diamonds are, supposed garlic mustard infestations, and the stars are buckthorn, and incorporating some other information so that you can use a map for different purposes, such as timber management, that sort of thing. It can be really simple. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. And again, this is something I can help you with to some extent. So let me know if you're interested. And then a timeline is kind of the biggest thing, in my opinion, for a plan, because that has your goals and objectives, and kind of like a deadline for each objective, I guess, and for each invasive. So let's see, I have a couple examples. So here's one I made for a landowner, and I'm not going to read through this whole thing, but it can be fairly detailed. And in this one, I'm incorporating applying to grant programs, that sort of thing. So it doesn't have to be just invasives. I mean, managing your woodland is kind of a complex task. So there's a lot going on. There might be some finer details in your plan here, but keep it realistic. You don't want to overwhelm yourself. And the only thing, I want to point out here is that I kind of break it up by season. So, that'll give you 3 months to do each block of tasks here. So you can also, here's a column that has, which part of the woods are you trying to treat here. So you can break it up by stand and year or season. So here's a couple examples for that. All right, so that's a little bit on planning. I know that's kind of fuzzy, but the biggest takeaway is to just know your property as good as you can. Walk it every year really good. try and get a map, whether it's just a hand-drawn map, or something better, and make kind of a timeline of your goals. And so now we're going to move on to kind of some other steps afterwards. So monitoring, I think I kind of already covered this. So I'm just reading along. Yeah, like I said, this third bullet point, try to get everywhere on your property at least once a year. Walk it really good if you're able-bodied. If not, have, if you know someone able-bodied, to hike it really good and to know exactly where those, pockets of buckthorn are coming from. All right. Prevention. So, prevention, especially in St. Croix County, is gonna happen after control. So let me go back to this list. So monitoring, prevention, really prevention for us in St. Croix County is going to happen after controlling, because a lot of us already have invasives on our property. So after you do the control, then you want to kind of make sure things are stable. If you do have a nice property without too many invasives, then then it would happen after monitoring. So promote conditions that favor native plants. So what kind of conditions are those? Sunlight is a big one. So to favor native plants, you need a lot of sunlight. And if you don't have, if you just have kind of a dense overstory, a lot of shade, chances are, again, if you're in St. Croix County, you're going to have a lot of deer as well. Deer are going to come through and basically eat all the natives in that kind of shady understory. So the more sunlight you can get, the better. So once your invasives are in check, I would recommend kind of looking into a timber harvest, seeing what options you have for that. How much you might have to take out for timber harvest to get some more sunlight down to that forest floor. Because again, if it's just a dark, shady understory, you're really not going to get a lot of native plants coming back, and that's kind of due to the deer around here. And then another condition is just minimize your soil disturbance. So when you are doing a timber harvest, make sure you have dry, frozen ground when you're doing anything, because invasives love disturbed soil. So just be careful of that when you're getting any equipment in and out. If you do have to disturb the soil, or work in an area where there's invasives, and there's just no way you can no way that you can control them before you're getting this equipment in and out, just make sure you're washing the equipment, I guess. So that would fall under minimizing the spread, cleaning your equipment. And then obviously timber harvesting BMPs, so making sure the ground is dry or frozen again. All right. So prioritize, that was kind of that third step on our list here. So after you're preventing, but or I guess in our modified list for where we already have invasives, we've identified the invasives. Now we need to prioritize a plan of attack. So is there a certain area you want to favor personally for say a good hunting spot, maybe an upcoming timber harvest? What's the size of your population in terms of the invasives, right? So So actually with the size, smaller is better to start with. So you don't want to go straight after the um, the super dense, super heavy infestation. You're just going to overwhelm yourself right away. So you want to keep the nice areas nice. You're going to hear me say that a couple times, but that's kind of um, a motto. I heard someone else told me keep the nice areas nice, and I like that because it's that's the most effective use of your time is um, keeping that high quality habitat stable and flourishing. And then once those areas are stable, then you can go after those bigger pockets. If you do have some sort of planned timber harvest, if you're in MFL and you have a timber harvest out, 5-10 years from now, or if that's just something you're interested in, that should be um, that should automatically be like your number one priority because honestly, I would not recommend doing any timber harvesting unless you have like a good hold on your invasives. Otherwise, it's just going to make that problem so much worse. And it's part of the reason why we've gotten so bad here in Western Wisconsin is that we just do these timber harvests without considering the invasives, and there's nothing in your MFL plan that requires you to do anything with the invasives. So you just go ahead and cut it, and all of a sudden you have 20 acres of buckthorn underneath. So, all right, that's my spiel on that. What's next for priority? So, especially with buckthorn is an example. Um, it's called their dioecious plants. So there's both male and female plants. I have female underlined because those are the ones that make berries. So those are the ones you want to go after first. So I would say, especially so anywhere where there's a timber harvest, that's kind of main priority. And then any like scattered female, I'm just gonna say buckthorn, but really anything, um, any fruit bearing invasive, those are a priority too because those are how it spreads, right? And then other priorities such as aesthetics, it's perfectly acceptable um, if aesthetics is one of your goals, if you just want it to look nicer, that's perfectly fair. It doesn't have to be anything more than that. All right. Just wanted to see what we have in here. Okay. So, choosing the right method just because you have, some Roundup and, I don't know, a brush hog doesn't mean you should be using those things. So, try and inform yourself, on the best methods for, each invasive, and we're gonna go over that kind of at the end of the presentation here. What works best, what doesn't. Um, Also, like how much time do you have? That sort of thing. So if you're gonna, if you are gonna brush hog over these invasives, make sure you have a plan next year to come back in and treat those resprouts, because otherwise you're just going to be making your situation a lot worse. So have a plan, attack from the outside in. So if you do have kind of a pocket-like infestation, start from the outside, again, hitting those kind of scattered individuals, and then working your way towards the center of that infestation. Keep the nice areas nice, that should be a priority for you. No use in trying to go head first at the worst of it. Because if you do that, you're gonna run out of steam pretty fast, and your nice areas are, gonna become those bad areas pretty quickly. So don't disturb the soil. Mentioned that already. Minimize damage to your desired species, your native species, your non-target species. So choose selective methods of control where possible. Sometimes that isn't going to be possible if you have 99% buckthorn. Like if you live around Hudson River Falls, that there's a good chance where it's just pure buckthorn anyway. So but if you have a little bit of variety in there, avoid these broadcast kind of control methods that we're going to talk about later. So monitor progress, after you do your treatments, especially with like an herbicide treatment. Don't just like forget about it. Go back out there and see how effective it was. You don't want to miss something, and ask for help if you need it from me, from your family. Have them come out and help, neighbors, that sort of thing. And there are grants for this sort of work as well. Cost sharing depends on kind of your property size and that sort of thing. And unfortunately, we don't have much time to talk about grants tonight, but just know that they're out there. All right, so now getting into the meat and potatoes. What different ways can we do it? So pulling, that's the most simple way to control it. It's best for seedlings. I would say you're gonna see a lot of these weed wrenches and stuff like that. To the right here is a weed wrench, and these are really good. They work for that 1 to 2 inch diameter buckthorn. The thing is, they disturb the soil quite a bit. So and as you're doing that, you're shaking off all the berries into that disturbed soil, and you're probably going to end up with a nice carpet of invasives right in that spot anyway. So just be aware of that. I'm not going to tell you to not get these. I mean, they're great, and can really save your save your back without using herbicide, right? So and any goal in any of these methods is going to be eventually targeting that root system, whether it's not initially with these methods. That should be kind of the end goal, is eventually you want to kill that root system or remove it, which is exactly what pulling does. Mowing,
Andy, we got a quick question in the chat. What is the tool called, and where can we get one?
It's called a weed wrench, I think. There are different brand names out there. I am not sure where you can get it. I don't think I've seen them at the hardware store personally. I bet they have them at Farm and Fleet. But I would say it's something you're gonna have to order online probably. There's also forestry suppliers is a good source for these tools. Forestry suppliers, there's a magazine and a website that you can order from. So
I'll put that in the chat. I just found it. It's called an uprooter. I'll put
okay.
that in there, and I'll put the forestry supplies link in the chat. Thank you.
Yep. All right. right. So mowing or cutting, this is going to remove the top part of the plant, right? But it's gonna sprout right back. So again, it should be part of a plan, and a lot of times there's nothing you can do but um, nothing you can do but mow it down because it's so thick. You can't walk through it. So what else are you gonna do? Um, uh, Sorry, getting sidetracked here. Um, so a few different tools here. If you can be selective, this brush saw is a good option. That way you're not making this broadcast mowing where you're just taking out everything. So all the way up to what's called a fecon mower. So that's FECON, fecon. For this is really for like the heaviest infestations. They're really amazing machines. They attach to the front of a bobcat, and it's a drum shaped mower that kind of mulches everything up. And they're great if you have just like one of those situations where it's just like 99% buckthorn. I don't care what else is growing in here. I just got to get this down to the ground. Oh, I had a cons list here. So again, it's not going to eliminate anything. I guess one thing cutting any invasive conifer such as red cedar or juniper can kind of invade like grassland or old fields. That actually will kill a juniper if you just cut it off. So otherwise, any hardwood broadleaf species, they're going to sprout right back.
Andy, I had a question about the cons about mowing.
Yeah.
If a person cut right before the seeds started coming out, wouldn't that prevent the spread of more of those seeds if you cut at that certain time of year?
Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Susan. Especially for something like garlic mustard, where you have just like a carpet of invasives, the best time to mow is when the plant is flowering, right? So that means it has as much of its energy up in the top of the plant. It leafed out, all the energies in the leaves and then in these flowers as well. So this plant is, trying to reproduce through its flowers. So if you cut it off right then, that's a great time to do this mowing. So great point.
And another question I had about mowing or pulling the male plants. I didn't quite understand. You said that you want to go for the female plants, which I understand, but is it still important if we can to get the roots of the male plants out of there, or are they not gonna are they not perennials, the males, or how does that work?
Well, it's basically, I say that as kind of a time management and where to focus your efforts. So, I mean, the males are going to, stay there. Buckthorn, if it's a male tree, it's obviously going to keep growing, right? But it's not going to be spreading anything. So your first step should be to remove any plants that are going to be spreading, making your situation worse. And if you have, if you have the choice to, skip over a male just for time's sake, that's not the worst thing to do. And I'm talking when when you have kind of a scattered situation where, you know, you have one here, one there. The first, you know, when you have that bottle of Garlon or other herbicide, just kind of go after the females first. So does that make
Okay,
sense?
yeah, thank you.
So just, I guess, be careful with mowing. You know, I've seen where people will just kind of mow in the woods just to, you know, keep the buckthorn down. And then you kind of end up with like a park-like stand of, you know, a park-like forest where, you know, it looks like you could walk through it pretty easily, I guess. But um, you want you want to let some of that native growth to come back. So it shouldn't be the only thing you do. Um, you know, you might be able to do that once, but I would say not more than once to do these like big broadcast mows.
Andy, we got a couple more chat questions. First, is box elder considered an invasive species? And second, where did buckthorn originate?
I'll start with box elder. Box elder is a native. It's kind of like a native invasive, so it is native to this area. It is invasive, especially in young tree plantations or yeah, where you're trying to establish kind of a younger crop of trees. They, for some reason, they just always show up in kind of those situations and can really, you know, outgrow whatever you're trying to grow. So in that situation, they are invasive. If you just have, you know, a few here and there in the woods, there's no reason to really do anything about it. They're again, they're a native tree. You know, the birds eat the seeds, and they grow in kind of wet areas. So a lot of times you'll see them kind of in a low lying wet area, you know, along with maybe say a silver maple, cottonwood. So it's perfectly fine to leave box elder in you know, your kind of wet areas of the property. And then buckthorn, it originated from Europe, I want to say, and it was planted for erosion control. So it was intentionally brought over, and it was also used ornamentally because it makes really nice hedges. So for, you know, privacy ornamental sake. So that's where it came from. And it's been here a long time. I think it was like early 1900s when it was first introduced. So I don't know how long it's been in like the Midwest, but it's been around. So again, with the mowing, great first step. Here is some work we did at Willow River State Park. So this is all buckthorn and honeysuckle and prickly ash. And we went in with, I'm going backwards with this Fecon mower, and, you know, went around the trees, and this is what it looked like afterwards. So it does a really great job, right, of getting it down to the ground. And this is just one of those situations where we just had to do something, right? And by getting it down to the ground, now it's going to resprout about, you know, probably 5 feet the first year. And at that point, it's so much easier to treat rather than trying to deal with this and, you know, spraying this type of growth. You're spraying stuff that's you know, waist high or shoulder high. And I'll get into how the actual herbicide part is done, and then that's that's really effective to kill the root system that way. All right, so grazing, this is pretty similar to mowing. You probably have seen a lot about goat grazing in the woods. We're still kind of learning about how effective this is, the goat grazing. I mean, they do a good job at eating buckthorn, that's for sure, but they're not selective to just buckthorn. They'll eat the good stuff too. So, and obviously they can't get super high, super large buckthorn. They can tip some of it over, but not everything. So, and a lot of times when you have a situation where it's just pure buckthorn, so the goats can eat whatever anyway, those buckthorn are too large at that point. So I don't know, we're still kind of learning about it. It's a work in progress. We'll see. There's a lot of businesses out there that are, kind of not taking advantage, but they're just a lot of businesses popping up for, goat grazing. So I'd say be a little wary. Make sure it is another tool though. So it is like mowing. So just make sure to combine it with something else afterwards, because the goats aren't going to, get rid of your invasives. They're just going to kind of set them back. All right, girdling. So this is around here. I would say girdling is done a lot on black locust. And that's because if you try and cut a black locust down, it's going to send up like 1,000 suckers per tree. So by girdling it, it kind of suppresses that a little bit. You do need to apply an herbicide though, for this. And so yeah, even if you cut down these are black locusts in this picture too here. Even if you cut it down and apply herbicide on the stump, it still just sprouts back like crazy. So girdling, it's good for, killing a standing tree. It's also used on box elder. So someone mentioned box elder before. If you have these great big box elder trees at the edge of your field where you plan on planting, make sure to girdle and spray those box elder trees, because they're just going to dump seeds into your field where you're planting. And yeah, so like I said, they love those open fields. So cut stem or cut stump, it's really effective because you're cutting it down and you're putting the herbicide where it counts, right on the right on the water transportation vessels of the tree on the stump there. So and you get to see your work as you're going. So it's a good practice to it's satisfying to do, to cut down a bunch of invasive stuff, right, and make sure it's not going to be sprouting back. Use minimal herbicides with this too. Unlike spraying the leaves, you're just treating the outside of the stump. And so why do you treat the outside of the stump? It's because that's the outside is the only living part of the tree, or of the stem. This middle part, this heartwood, it's called, there's no actual living tissue in here. So it's, you'd be wasting herbicide basically. So that's why we do that. Make sure you know how to your experience with a chainsaw, because felling accidents do happen. best with more than one person. I don't really know why I put that as a con. Maybe I like working in the woods alone, but ineffective during spring. So um, if you do this in the spring, you know, the tree's going to be pushing out sap into the top of the tree for leaf out, right? And it's just going to push your herbicide right out. So it's not going to go down into the root system like we want it to. It's just going to get pushed right out. So don't do this during the spring. So just a couple things on herbicides. You can use glyphosate or Roundup as you know, for this cut stump treatment. But the thing is, you have to do it, you know, right away, right within minutes of the cut. And it has to be above freezing too. It's Roundup and other glyphosate-based herbicides are water-based, so they're gonna freeze on you. And glyphosate, that's the active ingredient, right? So that's what's kind of the doing the work. And same with here, triclopyr. So you have to actually look at the label and make sure, you know, see what's actually in there. A lot of times you'll see, you know, glyphosate 2%, something like that. Other ingredients 98%. So that's the active ingredient. Same with triclopyr. The brand names are Garland 4, Element 4. If these two with the number 4, they're oil based, so so you can apply them, you know, when it's a bit colder, when it's below freezing, but not totally, you know, not below 0, I would say. The thing is with Garland, I'd say Garland is the most common one you'll see for triclopyr. It's expensive. It's like $100 a gallon, I want to say. And you're mixing it at about, you know, 20% ish. So it's expensive. You have to, it's a little harder to find. I'll send you some resources on where to get it, but all right.
Question.
Yeah.
Is fall the only quality time to treat buckthorn?
It's the best time, and we're going to get into that. It's the best time because it's you see the buckthorn the best. It's the only green thing in the woods, especially late October, and it's not the only time, no. So we'll get into that a little bit later. All right, so if you met me before, hopefully I've given you the good word of basil barking. So this is a really nice method. It's easier than cut stump because all you're doing is spraying the outside of the stem here. And you can do this any time of year. And this works because the Garland, it's an oil-based herbicide. So it'll absorb through the bark and get down into the root system. And yeah, it's just a real lifesaver. You know, this is all you need is a either backpack sprayer or a little handheld sprayer as well. So you don't need to be lugging around a chainsaw. You know, all you need is this is a sprayer. And it gets tougher, you know, the bigger your target species are. So I'd say basil bark gets best for anything 6 inches and under in diameter, I should say. And anything that's like clumping and sprouting a bunch of stems, it gets a little tough to treat those. You have to get fully around the stem, and in the situation where you have a bunch of stems, you have to get around every single one. So at that point, I would suggest you just cut those down and then treat the stump. It's a little easier that way. Most of the basil bark formulations will have kind of a dye in it, unless you're mixing it with diesel. And again, you'll get these recipes, you know, afterwards. But some people, you can mix it with diesel. I shouldn't say some people. I do it too, so that's fine. Just some sort of oil base, and where was I going with this? Make sure there's a dye in there so you can keep track of what you've treated, so that you're not, you know, wasting herbicide and applying twice on the same tree. So foliar herbicide, again, this is what you would do like after a big mowing project, or any carpet-like infestations. If you have this great big branching buckthorn that's been dropping berries, you know, like 1,000,000 berries a year, and you finally get to killing that buckthorn, you know, you're going to have a carpet under there. So at that point, you'd want to do a foliar treatment. And I should, or let me get through this first. So it's, you know, obviously you're going to need a heavy infestation for this to be effective. Otherwise, you run the risk of spraying your natives and non-target species, and you need to calibrate your sprayer, which can be a little daunting if you're just getting into this. So it can be an ATV mounted thing like this. Otherwise, even calibrating your backpack sprayer and controlling, you know, how fast you're walking and seeing how much you're applying, you know, per swath. That should be something you consider when you're spraying, because otherwise you don't want to exceed, you know, how much you're putting into the soil, so that you're not like damaging, so you're not doing an excessive amount and, you know, kind of killing everything. But you also want to make sure you're putting enough in there. So this is a good job for, you know, a contractor to do. And, you know, there's a lot out here making a living treating buckthorn, so they're out there. And I kind of harped on this already, but make sure you're combining your methods. You know, it's not a one thing beats all. You want to do a little of everything based on the situation. All right, so getting into some specific plants. Garlic mustard, this is a biennial, so it starts the first year it grows, it forms what's called the rosette, and it's not going to flower that first year. It's just going to have this, just these green leaves here, and then the second year it's going to flower. So treating these rosettes is good. So, you know, either spraying it with glyphosate, otherwise, obviously pulling garlic mustard, you might have, you know, heard of or seen when they're in the second year. That's really effective. They pull out super easy in the springtime, so it's a great way to control garlic mustard is by pulling. And if you have just a huge infestation, you know, doing a bit of controlled spray, foliar spraying is another good option. So buckthorn, you know, what else needs to be said about buckthorn? But so the best time, to Paul's question here, the best time to ID it is in mid to late October, and treating it is in that same time. That's the best time, just because it's the best time to, you know exactly where your buckthorn is. And in the case where you're trying to do a foliar treatment, everything native will have dropped its leaves in the fall at that point. So you minimize the risk of, you know, overspraying and hitting your non-target species. Again, is it the only time? No, absolutely not. Basil barking can be done any time of year. So I encourage you to, even in the dead of winter, right, as long as it's above 0. I see the question in the chat here. Does pulling garlic mustard disturbs the soil? Does it perpetuate the problem? Good point. It shouldn't, if you're able to pull it before it seeds out. So if you're pulling it while it has flowers on it, you've caught it in time. are you disturbing the soil for other things? Potentially, but it's, you know, you're doing more good than harm at that point. So if it's already seeded out, at that point, it's not worth it. Uh, it's just the seeds are just there, right? So pulling it, I mean, if you can completely remove it out of the woods, then that's okay. But I think it's worth I think it's more effective to just wait till next year at that point. A lot of stuff here for you to, I guess, refer back to, you know, when you print this out. So I'm not going to go through it all here, but basically it's all stuff we've talked about too. So cut, mow, wait, spray or resprouts for those heavy infestations. And yeah, so come back to this slide if you want a summary of kind of the control methods. And just a note here, you know, look closely. So it's sometimes you don't notice what's, you know, look at this top right here, that's buckthorn. So you're probably not going to notice that. It just looks like, you know, a leaf in the woods, right? Or any normal plant in the woods. But so a lot of times you'll have just like a ton of these, and then I get a lot of complaints where people are saying, well, I didn't have buckthorn, and then, you know, once I thinned the woods out, we had, you know, it's just covered. Well, the truth is it was there the whole time. It's you just didn't notice it because it's can be kind of discreet when it's a seedling. So you know, get to know what it looks like at all stages. And these are great, obviously, for pulling. So when you do find them, just yank them out of the ground. Prickly ash, I just want to mention this because sometimes it gets confused for buckthorn. You know, people will see these spines and think, oh, that's a thorn, so that, you know, there's the buckthorn. But this is prickly ash. It's a different invader. It is actually a native prickly ash, but it can become invasive. A fun fact actually about prickly ash, it's in the citrus family of plants. It's our only native citrus here in Wisconsin. But yeah, it's not fun to work with, not fun to walk through. It does make good cover for wildlife though. So I have treated it, you know, if I am treating buckthorn, I will. And there's a ton of prickly ash. I'll just hit the prickly ash too, just to set it back. But I'm not going to concentrate on it as much as the buckthorn. I want to leave some of it. Honeysuckle, that was my arch nemesis when I was working in kind of southeast Wisconsin. It's a lot worse down there, but we do have it up here. It can just get super thick and a ton of stems per plant, so it's really hard to treat as well. And again, identifying it, if you're there on Tuesday, has this hollow pith with opposite leaf arrangement. So, and then obviously the nice showy flowers in the summer, and usually a bright red berry. So nice looking bush, but it's super invasive. So for these bigger bushes, rather than trying to spray into the into the canopy of the honeysuckle, just cut it down and spray the resprouts next year with glyphosate. A note on honeysuckle, the best herbicide for it actually is glyphosate, unlike buckthorn. Buckthorn will, some people have luck with glyphosate or Roundup, but the best thing is triclopyr. It's the opposite for honeysuckle. And then amber maple, this is a pretty common one around St. Croix County. It's still sold in nurseries. It's still planted. I wish it wasn't, because it invades old fields pretty readily and woodlands. So use the same control methods as buckthorn on this one. It is gorgeous in the fall, but unfortunately it does spread. It's not a native, and it spreads like crazy. It gets super thick around Hudson. Earthworms real quick here. So earthworms, they basically eat all of the leaf material and organic material off the forest floor and leave you with bare soil, and that really hinders your forest regeneration. There aren't really any known control methods for earthworms, unfortunately. So if you have them, it's kind of a big question mark at this point. It's, what do we do long term? Maybe you have to do some tree planting in the woods to rely on that rather than the natural regeneration, because an acorn, I should say, isn't gonna seed into this pellety soil that these earthworms make. It's not gonna be able to grow in that. So nor is a maple, nor is any sort of kind of native tree, I guess. All right. So summary here. Harped on a lot of this. I just want to, I don't think I talked much about setting realistic goals. So making sure, you're not, you're setting your making sure you are setting yourself up for success. So make something, if you're new to this, just do like, identify the first year. Second year, just treat like scattered buckthorn, maybe like a 1/4 acre at most. Don't burn yourself out on this. So it can seem really overwhelming. But yeah, reach out to me, ask for help. We can make a plan. We can do this. It's amazing what I've seen like one person do when they do have the time for it. Say like after retirement, it's amazing what one person can do if they use the right methods. I've seen people Basil Bark like 10 acres of thick buckthorn. So it's doable. It's doable. All right.
Yeah, Andy, I had a question. Thanks so much. That was fantastic information. And one question I had was about garlic mustard control. I've heard a lot of different things about how to handle garlic mustard, and I guess there's some kind of a study out east that's saying, maybe not even do anything because it grows in 6-year cycles or something kind of strange like that. So that's one question I had. And then along the lines of some ideas about what to do, other ideas besides nothing, is burning, like with a torch. It's and kind of walking along with a little torch and burning the little shoots.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know about the 6-year cycle thing. That's really interesting. I'm gonna look into that. But yeah, burning a weed torch was actually in this presentation, but I cut it for time. It can totally be used. I would say be careful, especially you're treating let's see, garlic mustard. It's like the first thing to green up in the woods, and so that's going to be during prime forest fire season. So
yeah.
Wisconsin does have a forest fire season. It's in the spring. It's after the snow melts, before green up. So yeah, I would do it with caution. I have not used one myself, so I don't know like what the risk of that is, but that's the first thing that comes to my mind.
Yeah, and then one last question was, we're working in some woods that have oak, white oak, so we're really kind of sensitive to the concern of oak wilt. And so I'm wondering, like, there's been some suggestion to not do any cutting, for instance, except for the winter months because of the sensitivity of the root system for oak. So what about applying herbicide near oaks? Is that a problem, or is it just mainly cutting we have to be careful of?
Yeah.
Or
so,
yeah.
Oak wilt, it spreads two ways. It spreads underground through underground root grafts, and really red oak does that a lot more than white oak, and then it also spreads overland through sap feeding beetles, and those sap feeding beetles are attracted to wounds on the trees. So it's really cutting is the thing you have to avoid during the growing months. And as far as herbicide, that won't have an effect. There is an herbicide called Tordon, like Tordon with a T as in Tom, that was used for a while, and that had kind of an unwanted effect. It would affect the trees around it. So say you did a basil bark on a buckthorn, it would actually kind of leach into the soil somehow and kill stuff around it. So we don't use that anymore. So that would be the only thing to look out for, I guess. But Garlon, anything else you're treating with these days should be safe in that regard.
And there are a couple more questions in the chat. Can you see them? Otherwise, I can read them out loud.
I got them.
Okay.
All right. All right, high stumping for buckthorn. I've seen it work. I've seen high stumping work, especially when I'll see them high stump it and then kind of like scrape the bark off as well. I'd say high stumping it works, especially if it's like a over where you have a kind of a shady forest, like where it's not so open, not a lot of sunlight, because then that buckthorn struggles to sprout back because there isn't as much light. So if anyone isn't familiar with high stumping, it's really what it sounds like. It's cutting the stump, a few feet off the ground, and it works really well for some things. Buckthorn, like I said, I have seen it work. I've also seen it not work. So it's really effective at setting it back. It like when it doesn't work, the buckthorn still looks pretty rough afterwards. So high stumping is great for ironwood. If ironwood is kind of a problem in your woods, I didn't have time to talk about ironwood, but that's what I would say about high stumping. All right, next question. Burning buckthorn with the weed torch. Yeah, it'll melt the it'll kill it. So it'll top kill it. So it won't kill the root system. Like I said earlier, your goal is to eventually kill that root system or remove that root system. So it's gonna sprout back, but yeah, it's gonna kill the top of it. All right, will repeated mowing work with large stands of garlic mustard? It will reflower after mowing once. Yeah, I think it will. It will work eventually. You'll eventually knock out that seed source, that ability for it to spread. So as long as you get it before it sets seed, yeah, that is a good way to do it. I would recommend trying it on. I would recommend trying it if nothing else is growing there anyway. If it's just pure garlic mustard, and you're a little hesitant to use herbicide on that large of an area, yeah, go ahead and try. Needle cast on pine trees. So I assume you're talking about Rhizosphaera needle cast on like a blue spruce. You can treat it with a copper herbicide, or it's actually a fungicide, I should say, because needle cast is a fungal disease. Not really my bag. That's more of an urban forestry topic. But that copper fungicide it'll prevent the needle cast from spreading, but it's not gonna, if you have branches that are already dead, it's not gonna bring those back.
There any
Um,
other questions
Yeah,
for Andy?
Andy, I had one more question that I don't know that it was clear. So if we're girdling trees in an oak forest, is it best to just do that in the winter time because it involves cutting, or can it happen any time of the year because we're cutting non-oaks?
Um, yeah, it can happen any time of year unless you're girdling, oak trees, right? Then you
Yeah,
wouldn't want to, but I assume that's not what you're doing, right?
nope, we're just girdling mainly maples, and just wanted to be careful once again to prevent any spread of oak wilt or disease.
Gotcha. Yeah, there is no risk if you're just girdling maple. It won't the oak wilt it can't spread through a maple. It can only affect the yeah, it only affects a wounded oak tree. So
Okay. And then
overland. So
you
mhm.
mentioned treating after girdling. Mainly what we do is just girdle. Is it necessary to treat?
No, no, it's not. It's necessary for black locust. So
Okay,
otherwise you're gonna end up with a ton of resprouts, but no, if it's a different kind of hardwood and you're seeing effective, results on, especially if it's more of a TSI application where TSI being timber stand improvement, you're trying to, change the species composition. You're not necessarily trying to get rid of invasives. It's okay if that, maple resprouts. But whatever you're doing it next to an oak tree, and now that oak tree is able to, grow freely. It doesn't matter if the maple next to it resprouts, I guess. And if it doesn't resprout, well, even better.
All great questions. I know we're over a little bit on time, but if anybody has any other questions for Andy?
Could you hear me on this question?
Yes, go
yeah.
ahead.
Who would one contact in the DNR to see about a grant for working on your property invasives? My problem is that I can't walk hardly at all, so I'm kind of in need of help in a way.
Yeah. Well, a grant will help you financially with, a contractor, and it depends. So who you contact, that would be me in St. Croix County. Are you in St. Croix County?
No, it'd be Clark County and Outagamie County.
Okay, gotcha. Lauren, how can
Yeah,
we get them that forester?
yeah. Can you see the chat bar or the chat box?
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, I can look up the local forester. You don't have to go to the trouble if that's who it would be.
It is, yeah. That
Yeah,
would be
okay.
Justin Kania for Clark County, or Justin Capusta for Clark County.
Right.
I'm
Yeah.
not sure about Outagamie, but
Sure, I can dig that up. Yeah,
okay.
that's fine. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Well, this is great. I'm loving all these questions. This is fun. Anyone else?
any suggestions for sumac?
Yeah. That's it depends on the situation. It can be sprayed like a buckthorn. It can be mowed down if it's in kind of a grassland setting. You might only have to mow it because the grasses will kind of take over. Um, a lot of sumac we deal with gets burnt in prescribed burning, so that's another method, but that's how we deal with it on state lands. But are you seeing it just in the prairie?
Yeah, mainly in the prairie and in the edge of the woods.
Yeah, so I would say you could first try just cutting it, down at the base and trying to promote those grasses to grow over it. Otherwise, planting, replacing it with some sort of wildlife shrub like a cranberry, high bush cranberry, or dogwood or hazelnut. That And if you're going to do that, you're probably going to want to treat the sumac so that it's not competing with your planting there. But that'd be a good long-term solution, is getting something else established there.
Thanks a lot, Andy.
You bet.
All right, thanks everybody for sticking around a little after time. Look for that email that I mentioned either tomorrow or on Monday, and we will be back next week with looking at how to find information about forestry on the internet, and then the final presentation we will be going over some of the language of foresters. So join us next week, and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me through email. All right, have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.